New York City. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. That is the promise, isn't it? For over a century, this collection of islands has been the center of the modern world. It is the capital of finance, the capital of culture, the city that never sleeps. It is the skyline that defines what America looks like to the rest of the planet. We are raised on the mythology of New York, the lights of Broadway, the power of Wall Street, the romance of Central Park in the snow. But in 2025, the romance is dead, and the city that never sleeps is now the city that cannot wake up from a living nightmare. If you walk down Fifth Avenue today, past the flagship stores of Gucci and Tiffany's, you are witnessing the fall of Rome in real time. The contrast is no longer just unfair, it is grotesque. New York has always had a gap between the rich and the poor. But today, that gap has become a canyon that is swallowing the city whole. We are witnessing the unraveling of the social contract in America's greatest metropolis. From the terrifying depths of the subway tunnels to the overcrowded, crumbling shelters of the Bronx, New York is buckling under a convergence of crises that would destroy a lesser city. Welcome to New York Homeless Crisis 2025, the fall of America's greatest city. Today, we are going to investigate how the Big Apple began to rot from the core. We are going to look at the collapse of the right to shelter law, the explosion of the mental health crisis underground, and the economic exodus that threatens to turn Manhattan into a ghost town of the super-rich surrounded by a sea of despair. To understand the fall of New York, you have to go underground. You have to descend into the circulatory system of the city, the subway. For decades, the subway was the great equalizer. Bankers and construction workers rode the same train. But in 2025, the subway has transformed into something else. It is the largest mobile homeless shelter in the world. It is a dystopian ecosystem where thousands of people live, eat, sleep, and die without ever seeing the sun. The E-train, famously known as the Homeless Express, runs entirely underground, protecting its riders from the harsh New York winter. But step inside a car today, and the smell hits you first. It is the smell of untreated infection, of unwashed bodies, of fentanyl smoke, and of human waste. The ridership is down because the fear is up. We have all seen the headlines, the random shoves onto the tracks, the slashings, the erratic screaming matches. This is not just crime. This is the result of a mental health infrastructure that has completely collapsed. The subway has become the dumping ground for the people the hospitals can't treat and the jails won't hold. When you see a person shouting at invisible demons on the N train, you are looking at a policy failure. New York closed its large psychiatric institutions decades ago, promising community care, but the care never came. Instead, the subway system became the asylum of last resort. And for the working-class New Yorker trying to get to a job, the commute has become a game of Russian roulette. But why are so many people underground? Why aren't they in the shelters? This brings us to the unique tragedy of New York, the right to shelter. Unlike Los Angeles or Phoenix, New York is legally obligated to provide a bed to anyone who asks for one. It is a law born of compassion. But in 2025, that law has broken the city's back. The system is overwhelmed. We have seen the images of lines stretching around the block at the Roosevelt Hotel in Midtown, once a symbol of old-world glamour. Now an intake center for a crisis that has no end. The convergence of the local homelessness crisis with the massive influx of migrants and asylum seekers over the last few years has created a perfect storm. The city is spending billions of dollars a year just to warehouse people in hotels, tent cities on airfields, and office buildings. And yet, it is not enough. The local homeless population, the veterans, the addicts, the long-term street sleepers, often refuse to go into these shelters. Why? Because they are dangerous. We spoke to men living on the street in Hell's Kitchen who told us they would rather risk freezing to death on a steam grate than risk being stabbed or robbed in a city shelter. The right to shelter has become a right to a cage. When the safety net becomes a threat, the people choose the freedom of the sidewalk. And the sidewalk is unforgiving. New York is not California. You cannot survive a winter here in a tent easily. The fall of the city is visible in the extremities of the people you see on the street. Frostbite, gangrene, the physical toll of the cold. combined with the flesh-eating effects of the xylazine-laced fentanyl supply, means that the ambulance sirens never stop wailing. But let's look up. Look away from the street level and look at the skyline. This is the great paradox of 2025. While the streets are filled with misery, the skyline is growing. The Billionaire's Row on 57th Street features needle-thin towers where a penthouse costs $100 million. These apartments are often empty, safe deposit boxes in the sky for foreign oligarchs. This wealth gap is driving the crisis. The rent in New York has detached from reality. A working-class person, a teacher, a nurse, a sanitation worker, they can barely afford to live in the city they service. The working homeless population is exploding. These are people who have jobs, who shower at gyms, and sleep in their cars in Queens or Brooklyn because the rent is simply mathematically impossible. When a city becomes too expensive for its own citizens, it begins to die. The delis close, the artists leave, the culture stagnates, and what is left is a playground for the rich and a holding cell for the poor. We also have to talk about the fear factor. New York relies on density. It relies on people walking, shopping, and eating out, but the pervasive sense of disorder, the tents on 8th Avenue, the needles in Washington Square Park, the aggressive panhandling, has created a psychological toll on the residents. People are leaving, the tax base is eroding, and as the tax money leaves, the budget for social services shrinks, making the homeless crisis even worse. It is a doom loop, a cycle of decline that feeds itself. The police are caught in the middle. If they enforce the law, they are accused of criminalizing poverty. If they do nothing, the public safety collapses. The leadership of the city seems paralyzed, offering press conferences and slogans while the conditions on the street deteriorate. But amidst the gloom, there is the human element. The tragedy of the individual. Take a walk through Tompkins Square Park. You will see the ghosts of the city. The young runaways who came here thinking it was the place to be discovered, only to be discovered by a fentanyl dealer. The elderly who were evicted from rent-controlled apartments and had nowhere else to go. New York is a grinder. It chews people up, and in 2025, the safety mechanisms that used to catch people are rusted through. The fall of New York is not just about economics or crime statistics. It is about the loss of the city's soul. New York was supposed to be the tough, gritty survivor, but there is a difference between grit and hopelessness. There is a difference between a city that is hard and a city that is cruel. Right now, New York is cruel. It walks past the bodies on the sidewalk. It steps over the person overdosing on the subway stairs. It puts on noise-canceling headphones to drown out the screams. We have developed a New York stare, a 1,000-yard stare that allows us to ignore the humanitarian disaster happening 3 feet away from us. But we cannot ignore it forever. The rot is spreading. So, is this the end? Is the greatest city in the world finished? History tells us that New York is resilient. It survived the Great Depression, the crime wave of the 70s, and the attacks of 9/11. But this crisis is different. It is insidious. It is internal. The solution requires more than just money. It requires a fundamental rethinking of how we handle housing, mental health, and addiction. It requires acknowledging that the right to shelter has failed and needs to be replaced with a right to treatment and a right to housing. It requires the billionaires in the towers to care about the people on the grades. If New York falls, if the beacon of American urbanism collapses into chaos, it sends a signal to the rest of the country. If we can't solve this here, with all this wealth and all this power, we can't solve it anywhere. The lights of Broadway are still bright. The Empire State Building still glows at night. But down here, in the shadows, the city is dying. We need to wake up. We need to look at the uncomfortable truth. New York City is at the precipice. And it is looking down. Thank you for watching this investigation into the fall of New York. It is a tragedy that affects us all, because New York belongs to the world. If you believe that we need to save our cities from this collapse, please like this video. It helps us break through the algorithm and share this reality. And please, subscribe to America's Uncomfortable Truth. We will continue to shine a light on the darkest corners of our nation. Because the truth is the first step toward change. Leave a comment below. Do you think New York can come back from this? Or is the decline permanent? Stay safe, look out for your neighbors, and never stop demanding better.